Hi all, and welcome to the Paul Chandler Show. I'm your host, Paul Chandler. It's a nice episode where we're going to be discussing COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. However, though, we'll be looking at the clinical side of it in a fun, animated way. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back to talk about COPD. Welcome back, everyone. In tonight's episode, we're going to be discussing COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, on the clinical side of it. So for a coder or an auditor, having a clinical background experience is not necessary, but knowing some clinical information on conditions that they're looking at the documentation for will help them know for certain keywords that they need to look out for, and also possible questions to query the provider. So tonight's discussion of COPD, well, again, we'll be looking at the clinical side. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, Captain Awesome here again, and today we're going to talk about COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Now, it is a chronic inflammatory lung disease that causes obstructed airflow from the lungs. That's why we're out here in the forest today, so we can breathe some nice, fresh, clean air. Symptoms of COPD include breathing difficulty, cough, mucus, also known as sputum production, and wheezing. It's typically caused by a long-term exposure to irritating gases or particulate matter, most often from cigarette smoke. People with COPD are at increased risk of developing heart disease, lung cancer, and a variety of other conditions. Emphysema and chronic bronchitis are two of the most common conditions that contribute to COPD. These two conditions usually occur together and can vary in severity among individuals with COPD. Chronic bronchitis is an inflammation of the lining of the bronchial tubes, which carry air to and from the air sacs known as alveoli in the lungs. It is characterized by daily cough and mucus production. Emphysema is a condition in which the alveoli at the end of the smallest air passages, known as the bronchioles, of the lungs are destroyed as a result of damaging exposure to cigarette smoke and other irritating gases and particulate matter. Although COPD is a progressive disease that gets worse over time, COPD is treatable. With proper management, most people with COPD can achieve good symptom control and quality of life, as well as reduced risk of other associated conditions. Hi everybody! Don't worry, Captain Scotty is here. Lads and lassies, now I'm going to be discussing the symptoms of COPD, because often they don't appear until significant lung damage has occurred, and they usually worsen over time, particularly if smoking exposure does continue. Now there are many signs and symptoms of COPD, and some of those do include the shortness of breath, especially if you're running around and doing physical activities, wheezing, chest tightness, a chronic cough that may produce the mucus that may be clear, white, yellow, or greenish, frequent respiratory infections, a lack of energy, an unintended weight loss in later stages, and swelling in the ankles and the feet or the legs. People with COPD are also likely to experience episodes called exacerbations, during which their symptoms may worse than the usual day-to-day variation and persist for at least several days. Thank you, Captain Scotty, and welcome back, by the way. Now, the main cause of COPD in developed countries is tobacco smoking. In the developing world, COPD often occurs in people exposed to fumes from burning fuel for cooking and heating in poorly ventilated homes. Only some chronic smokers develop clinically apparent COPD, although many smokers with long smoking histories may develop reduced lung function. Some smokers develop less common lung conditions, and they may be diagnosed as having COPD until a more thorough evaluation is performed. Now, with the lungs being affected on COPD, air travels down your windpipe, known as the trachea, and into your lungs through two large tubes, known as the bronchi. Inside your lungs, these tubes divide many times, like the branches of a tree, into smaller tubes, known as bronchioles, that end in a cluster of tiny air sacs, known as alveoli. The air sacs have very thin walls full of tiny blood vessels, known as capillaries. The oxygen in the air you inhale passes into these blood vessels and enters your bloodstream. At the same time, carbon dioxide, a gas that is waste production of metabolism, is exhaled out of the body. Your lungs rely on the natural elasticity of the bronchial tubes and air sacs to force air out of your body. COPD causes them to lose their elasticity and overexpand, which leaves some air trapped in your lungs when you exhale. Now, with the causes of airway obstruction, there are two main conditions, like Captain Awesome said before I arrived a little bit late. First is the emphysema, then the chronic bronchitis. Now, emphysema, in this lung disease, it causes the destruction of the fragile walls and elastic fibers of the alveoli. Small airways collapse when you exhale, impairing airflow out of your lungs. With chronic bronchitis, in this condition, your bronchial tubes become inflamed and narrowed, and your lungs produce more mucus, which can further block the narrow tubes. You develop a chronic cough trying to clear your airways. There are several risk factors for COPD, which include exposure to tobacco smoke, people with asthma, occupational exposure to dust and chemicals, exposure to fumes from burning fuel, and genetics. Complications of COPD include respiratory infections, heart problems, lung cancer, high blood pressure in lung arteries, and depression. There are several ways how you can help prevent COPD. For one, quit smoking to help reduce your risk of heart disease and lung cancer. Get an annual flu vaccine and regular vaccinations against pneumococcal pneumonia to reduce your risk or prevent some infections. And talk to your doctor if you feel sad or helpless to think you may be experiencing depression. And that concludes this discussion on COPD. Back to the studio with you, Paul, at the Paul Chandler Show. Bye-bye now. And thank you for watching this education moment on COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, on the Paul Chandler Show. Tonight's episode was brought to you by Clear Physician Services. Again, thank you for watching and have an awesome rest of your night. If you like this video and want to see more, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's so easy. It's right there. A little button. Just push it. Subscribe. I got all night. Nothing else to do. Just subscribe.